All right. Well, you have a guest. Let's get your guest on. We want to talk about this Tea Party stuff.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. We have Bob Parks on, who is with us from Project 21, who is a media-based focus organization committed to highlighting the diversity of political opinion in the black community. And Bob is also a producer at Media Research Center and has been to many of the Tea Party rallies, including the one on the Saturday before the health care vote in the House. How you doing, Bob?
Very good, Reverend. How are you?
Good. Now tell us what you observe at these Tea Party gatherings.
The Tea Parties that I've been to, I have names called at me. The names were my own. The violence were hugs from people who knew me from my website and from my previous writings. So the fact that you have different groups that have publicly said that they want to go to tea parties, bring racist signs, and have them photographed or videotaped to smear the tea parties shows me that the Tea Parties themselves have been anything comparable to different protests that you see on the left, protests that usually result in the destruction of public and private property, dozens, if not hundreds of arrests. I can't find less than a handful, if that, of news reports of Tea Party people who have been arrested, any reports of public property or private property damage. I don't know what the comparison is, besides the fact that they seem to be politically effective in scaring incumbent politicians.
Now, the racism, Professor Glaude, that has been charged at some of these Tea Party gatherings have been challenged. I had a big exchange on with Bill O'Reilly saying, show us the tapes, like if that people like John Lewis and others just made this up unless we can show them the actual footage of the N-word being used. And then even when you see the footage of the congressman being spat upon, they're saying, well, the guy kind of ran up on him. Was it really intentional? I mean, the denial seems to trivialize the impact of what Bob is saying.
Well, what I would love for us to do, Rev, is to kind of I don't want to give that kind of defense credence in the sense that I don't want us to get on, shall we say, to try to pursue congressmen or shouting homophobic comments at Representative Barney Frank. I trust the representatives at their word, that they're not just trying to create a kind of political, some kind of political cash out of this moment. I don't want to suggest that. What I want to do, though, is to tackle what I take to be at the heart of the claim that the Tea Party is about race in some significant way. How do we disentangle? And I hope, Bob, I hope you can help me answer this. And Rev, I would love to get your thinking on this. How do we disentangle states' rights discourse? Talk about states' rights, about the overextension of government, from questions of race.
Bob?
Well, first off, I think it's highly illustrative to say that we shouldn't have to have a discussion on whether there were racial epithets said. We don't want to go there. We don't need to find out if there were any recordings of it. That's very convenient. And
how is that convenient?
Well,
hold a minute. Let's pick this up on the other side of the break. Is the Tea Parties and Tea Partiers using race? Is it racist? Or is it just some of the fringe that they're getting blamed on? 1-877-532-5797. 1-877-532-5797. Keeping it real. Sharpton. We'll be right back.
Keeping it real. Keeping it real. Keeping it real. Keeping it real.
Keeping it real. Keeping Keeping It Real. I'm your host, Reverend Al Sharpton. We're in our weekly segment with Professor Eddie Glaude. We're talking about Tea Party and racism. And Professor Glaude, you'd engage Bob on this whole racist notion of the Tea Party gatherings. And Bob, you repeat your point that the professor was questioning you about.
Well, the whole point about Congressman Lewis, who says that he heard the N-word thrown at him, and in this electronic age, there should be proof of that before we start throwing around accusations of racism. And my point is, has no political person ever stretched the truth? Is he immune from suspicion of this?
But Brother Bob, this is the point I'm at. This is the point I'm making, and this is why I don't want to engage in this sort of argument. And the reason why I don't want to engage in this sort of argument is that it seems that folks on the right and in the United States generally keep raising the bar of what is considered to be racist. And if it was Elie Wiesel saying that someone had called him an anti-Semitic term, no one would be asking for proof. They would take it on the moral authority of who Elie Wiesel is. Since it's John Lewis, who said that someone called him the N-word, and he knows the depth of what that means given what he has experienced in his life, the idea that he has to prove it, that his word can't be taken. It seems like black folk have to justify their suffering, have to rationalize their feeling of insult, because it seems to indict other folk. Now, that seems to me something I don't want to get into. If I say that someone called me the N-word, as I had supported a particular legislation, or if John Lewis says that's what he heard, I trust him on his word, and we should just condemn it out of hand. So what is at the source of the defense itself?
So in other words, I could go out and I could just say, somebody called me the N-word, and they would have to take my word for it, and you could basically shut down any kind of political discussion, any kind of dissent, just because I decided I wanted to throw out something.
Why not just simply say that the person, if it's true or not, that this is abhorrent?
I mean, let me ask you.
Hold on, let me finish my point. And no one should, in the Tea Party, should condone this sort of behavior. There's no reason to say, show me the proof. The point is, I'm trying to ask you another kind of question. There is a recent poll that came out that showed that 25% of Tea Party adherents believe that the Obama administration favors African Americans over whites. On what basis does that kind of claim hold? The majority of supporters of the Tea Party believe that Mr. Obama does not share the values that most Americans live by, and that he does not understand the problems of people like themselves. And this involves that most of his policies, they say, favor the poor. What does that say about Tea Partiers?
And Bob, before you answer that, and let me add to that many of them are holding signs denouncing any black leadership. I've seen signs on the news with the president's picture, my picture, and I have nothing to do with what's going on in the Congress. I don't vote in Congress. And Congressman Rangel's picture. So, I mean, don't you at least have to concede there's a racial overtone when you couple the polls that Professor Glaude just said and what we're raising to you?
Well, with all due respect to you, and no slight intended, I don't remember seeing any signs with your picture.
Well, I didn't ask you, did you see him? I said I saw him.
Okay, but I mean, as someone who follows the Tea Parties and monitors, and I am looking for those racial signs and anything, and as far as Congressman Rangel, he is, I guess, a representative of corruption, the non-payment of taxes. He's the one who crafts tax legislation, and he cannot do his own taxes. There's some hypocrisy there that the
So then the point of the Tea Party is...
It's not a race issue.
All right, so the point of the Tea Party is in linking all of us together is what?
Well, I mean, all of us? You mean...
Yeah, that's the signs we saw. In fact, Bishop Jordan was on yesterday was citing about the sign. So, I mean, what is the point of that? Or the point of them harassing members of the Black Congressional Caucus? What is the point of that if it's not race-based?
Well, first of all, you know, this whole thing about the harassment and them being afraid for their safety, if that was the case, and these Tea Party people have such a reputation of being so dangerous, why did they decide to walk through the crowd on the street with one or two security guards. You would think that they would be either finding a different route, possibly underground, or they would have a whole bunch
so
of
let me get this
people
right,
around
Bob.
them. They didn't seem to feel that threatened. Now, let me ask you one
question.
question.
Wait a minute, before you ask me a question, let me ask you this. So your answer, just so we're clear on the conversation, your answer, if a congressman who has been a figure in history on the Selma March says someone called him the N-word, your answer is give me a tape. Your answer is that if a group of congressmen are walking through a crowd that harassed them, you say, why didn't they take another route? Don't you understand the pattern of what you're saying? Is the victim is always the problem. They should have taken another route.
If they thought it was so dangerous,
maybe they didn't know it was dangerous. Maybe they never, in their wildest imagination, thought people would behave like that. People demonstrate every day in Washington and don't behave like that. Maybe they gave them the benefit of being acting in a civil manner. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. Keeping it real. Sharpton. Professor Eddie Glaude, Bob Parks. We'll be right back after this.
Keep it real.
Keeping it real. I'm your host, Reverend Al Sharpton. And we're back. Professor Eddie Glaude, my co-host, every first hour on Thursday now. Bob Parks, Project 21, our guest. Go ahead, Bob. You wanted to raise a question. We're talking about the Tea Partiers and race. Bob?
Yes, Reverend. Have you ever spat?
Have I ever done what?
Have you ever spat?
Brother Bob, come on.
Simple, straightforward question.
Yes,
okay.
I think I have, yes.
Now, I'm going to speak for myself. I have never cupped my hands around my mouth when I decided to spit. Now, as far as the congressman who said that he was spat upon, that to me looked like more of a case of say it, don't spray it, than a deliberate spitting on a congressman. Those kind of charges are incendiary, but people know because of the racial sensitivities we have in this country that you can make a race charge and you don't have to have anything concrete to back it up.
All right, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. Is it incendiary to run up to a congressman and cuff your mouth and get up in his face? Whether you spitting or not. Let's take your point of spitting off the table. Was it incendiary for him to come on a congressman like that?
Well, he was behind the line. It was only so far he.
I didn't ask you that. He was in the congressman's face. You concede that, won't you?
Yes, he was.
All right, so that's not incendiary?
It happens in college campuses.
Oh, I see.
When college students stand up and turn their backs on the President of the United States during commencement ceremonies, I don't hear any calls for civility or saying that that's not right.
I mean, of course, people. I mean, this is part of the problem. Let's not just run down our talking points. Let's try to have a conversation here. And part of the point I'm trying to make here. No,
with all due respect, I'm not spouting talking points.
Well, no, in some ways you are, because part of what we're trying to do is what I said is that I did not want us to kind of go. I want you and I, me and you, to go. I wanted to take Congressman Lewis at his word. I wanted to take the congresspersons at their word, and just simply say, if you could say, if such behavior happened, then it's abhorrent. This should not happen.
And that's
this
a given.
Is horrible. That is a given. Say that and just move on.
Well, but again,
why don't you just simply say the N-word directed at Congressman Lewis is wrong, period. Now, why can't we talk about, you and I, talk about, and Reverend Sharpton, talk about the fact that the Tea Party's making arguments about government, making arguments about policy that disproportionately, right, impact those who I care a lot about, those who are locked on the underside of this society, and let's talk about the details of how your rejection of those policies reveal a kind of disposition towards the poor, a disposition towards black folk, a disposition towards immigrants that can be read.
Well, let me answer a couple
not only
of your questions.
but racist, brother.
I don't remember which one of you gentlemen asked me the question about the perception from the Tea Parties that they think that the Obama administration is anti-white.
No, it was come from a CBS.
So there was a poll. Right.
CBS, okay.
You want Fox News instead? That would be better.
I'm a Fox alumnus, so I have my preferences. But anyway.
So this is about news, man.
Is that a problem with you?
No, go ahead. I mean, it's not
well, go ahead, make your point, because I have to go to the phone.
Well, the point was, if we had videotape of a polling place, and there were some white dudes out front wearing fatigues and had built-in, would be the topic of conversation on this very show. But when you have Black Panthers who stand in front of a polling place, intimidating folk who are trying to go in and vote, and have them indicted and then freed by the administration, what does that perception to you look like if it was the other way around?
Indicted and then...
Well, first of all, wait a minute. First of all, I think the head of the Panthers denounced that, said they had nothing to do with that group, and that was roundly denounced. And I think that's all Professor Glaude is asking you to do. No. You raised it, and I'm answering your... Don't ask a question if you don't want an answer.
The point is...
You said what would be the reaction. I'm telling you what the reaction was.
The case was still dropped. That's where the anger is.
You said what would be the reaction. The reaction was the head of their group denounced it, and everyone denounced it. That was the reaction. That's the answer to your question. Now, would you denounce the behavior of the Tea Parties, since you made the analogy?
You want me to denounce something that
why?
Just because it was said.
Blah, 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 blah. You raised it, and I can't prove that these alleged Panthers did it, but it was denounced. Nobody said get a tape. Nobody said prove it.
It was on videotape.
Denounced. Now, you willing to do the same thing?
It was on videotape, and you could hear the audio.
This man running up in the congressman's face, spitting, was on tape. And this man, what you said coming, that was on tape.
When it's said about a congressperson, we're automatically supposed to just drop it?
Not just any congressperson.
No, we're saying that what is good for you is good for the other. You wanted to know how we'd respond, I answered it.
Well, how come the good congressman will not go on any television program and repeat that he heard these things said?
Well, Brother Bob, could it very well be that Congressman Lewis wanted to take the approach that I initially wanted to take? That is to say, if I had been called the N-word and someone asked me to justify it, I'm not in a court of law, but to justify me feeling insulted by someone else, why dignify that? That's the first thing. The second point is, I'm trying to just simply say, why not just simply say that sort of behavior is just abhorrent, period?
Because that's a given, it's abhorrent, but at the same time, we have people in this country who have made racist charges without any proof, and just because they said so, everybody's supposed to...
Who are these people you're talking about?
But again, it doesn't even matter. The point is that if they did...
It should matter. This is the...
No, the reason it doesn't matter is that everyone says if there's something racist, they denounce the racism. And that's all Professor Glaude said to you.
Reverend Sharpton, these are the kind of charges, as we know, can cost people careers, okay? These things have to be taken lightly.
Listen,
and just because a congressman says...
Let's go to the phones. I mean, you're talking about people in a demonstration who we don't even know their names. It don't cost their careers. It costs you and I and others our careers if we don't stand up and say this kind of stuff is wrong. Let's go to the phone. Let's go to Bob in Cleveland. Bob, you're keeping it real with Al Sharpton.
It doesn't sound very real to me. There's an extreme double standard here. Barack Obama went to the Million Man March led by a racist like a white-hating racist like Louis Farrakhan, and nobody said a word. Obama sat in a church where Hitlerian hate was instigated against white people. And let's just give an example. Reverend Wright talked about the AIDS virus being created by the government to kill black people. Why hasn't Obama investigated that charge now he's president? Because he knows it was a lie, and all it was hate being instigated against white people.
That's a fascinating claim, brother. I mean, it would be. I would love for you to say the same thing about Pat Robertson. I would love for you to say the same thing about the former life of Senator Robert Byrd. I would have loved for you to say the same thing about the life of the late Senator Strom Thurmond. Love for you to say the same thing about the life of the late Senator John Stennis. There's a double standard indeed. Part of what I'm trying to suggest here is that in the public domain, black suffering cannot be run across so quickly, cannot be dismissed so quickly.
The Al Sharpton Show gives you the real deal in dealing with the healthcare bill.
How you doing, Congressman Clyburn?
Hey, buddy, I'm doing great.
Majority Whip Jim Clyburn.
Your doctors and your hospitals get reimbursed for Medicare patients, Medicaid patients. You don't have equal reimbursement.
Over 32 million people are going to have health insurance.
Senior advisor to the President of the United States, Valerie Jarrett.
Millions of those people are going to be African American.
Get the real story.
It's about action.
It's about action.
Talk is cheap.
Bringing you the real deal. Is the Reverend Al Sharpton.
Keeping it real. I'm your host, Reverend Al Sharpton. Professor Eddie Glaude with us. Bob Parks from Project 21. Talking about the Tea Parties and race. Let's go back to Bob in Cleveland. Go ahead, Bob.
John Lewis, he never said a word during the Duke lacrosse case, where those young men, young white men, were total falsehoods and lies were made against them. John Lewis never said a word. He's one of the leading civil rights activists in the country. He never said a word during Tawana Brawley when false charges were made against a white district attorney. Now, if these people want to have credibility, if you want to give these people credibility, like John Lewis, any kind of credibility, they got to speak up when white people are being persecuted by black racists and black haters. And if they don't, then they become clowns. I look at John Lewis as a clown.
I would not call a congressman a clown, but
he's more than a congressman, brother.
But the point being made about false race charges, we had that issue also recently of that professor from, I believe it was UC Irvine, who vandalized her own car with racial epithets, and it was only after an investigation that she admitted it. There was another story about a professor who found a noose in her office. After an investigation, she admitted she was the one who left it there. That's why there's such sensitivity to these race charges that are just thrown out, because as soon as they're thrown out, we're supposed to not talk about it.
Well, why don't we just do this? But, Brother Bob, this is what I was trying to really get to, the policies that are being proposed or supported by Tea Partiers. But why don't we just simply do this? This is the claim. Any actual racist actions by proponents of the Tea Party, by Americans largely, are just simply wrong and should be resoundingly denounced.
You got it right.
There you go.
Okay.
Now, once we say that, and once I begin to believe, I hold the assumption that African Americans and our traditions, that black folk, and the suffering that African Americans have experienced throughout the history of this nation and today, that we don't have to, in some significant way, give an account of that suffering to make somebody else believe that the suffering is genuine.
So, in other words, I can just come up and just say...
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not suggesting that. I don't want to suggest that you can just make up anything and not be held accountable for it. But I do want to say that I don't feel the need to justify, right, black suffering to Bill O'Reilly, to justify black suffering to Fox News, to justify black suffering to anyone on the right or the left or in the middle. Now, part of what I want you to do, and this is why I love the idea of us having this conversation as reasoned Americans, how is it? What role does government play? What role does government play in relation to the suffering that is experienced in particular communities in the United States, particularly among African Americans?
Okay, well, to answer your question that you asked earlier about why the Tea Party is resistant to certain policies that help the poor, let me give you one example, the health care bill. There were a lot of reports about people calling up doctors and saying, okay, the health care bill passed, where's my free health care?
Oh.
Okay, now, the thing is, if this health care bill was supposed to be so
But are you suggesting that these calls, if they were made, are the reason the Tea Party is against the health care bill?
If I may finish, if this health care bill was so important to the poor, why doesn't it go into effect for the most part until 2 years after the next presidential election?
Because they couldn't get it passed. If they could have gotten if they could have gotten more immediate relief passed, I'm sure that's what they would have done. That's what they tried to get in Congress. They couldn't get it passed.
No, the point is the reason why they're
you asked the question. You have a problem with getting answers to your questions, don't you?
Well, I didn't respond with a blah, blah, blah. But
because that's what you said.
Can I ask a question about Barack Obama?
Pardon me?
Barack Obama, his concern about the poor. Let's give something he had direct control over. Minority children going to school on vouchers to private schools in the D.C. School district. First thing Obama gets in office, he takes away their vouchers.
Well, he has
now,
a principled...
Obama's kids go to a private school.
No, he has a principled reason.
Vouchers is not. Vouchers would only help a very, very minor select few people. That would not do. But and then you say, what about the other kids? You can't cover all. Hold it. They can't cover.
Vouchers mean nothing to you.
Of course they do. All of them, not a select few. Vouchers could only help a select few.
Keeping it real.
Got to take a break. Keeping it real. Sharpton. We'll be right back.
Keeping it real.